Trump is doing things that would have been head exploding even in the first Trump transition. He has essentially taken on the role and function of president without the responsibilities, without the information. Here he is, flying to Paris, meeting with other world leaders, openly conducting a foreign policy for the United States that is in some ways at odds with the actual current foreign policy of the United States. There's a reason why we have the idea of only one president at a time. And I think that's another one of those norms that's just being thrown out the window, actually.
Hello and welcome to the Bulwark Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Miller, a staff writer at The New Yorker, where she writes a weekly column on life in Washington. She's also the co-author of The Divider, a history of Donald Trump in the White House, no longer a history, which she co-wrote with her husband, Peter Baker. It is, of course, Susan Glasser. Welcome back. How you doing, Susan?
Hey, it's great to be with you again, Tim.
I guess since everybody's talking about it, I'm saving my thoughts from the end, but do you have any deep thoughts or hot takes about about Luigi or about Daniel Penny? Do you have anything you want to get off your chest on the issues everybody's are talking about?
Not beyond the blindingly original observation that, we live in a terrible, terrible timeline, and maybe everybody needs to be a little bit less online and a little bit more connected to people.
That's good. That's great. That is not original, but true and important, and
but not
kind of related to what I'm going to get to at the end. So that is right. Go touch some grass, people. Go meet some neighbors. It's not as bad out there as it might seem. Okay. You've renamed your column back.
Renamed
it in the New Yorker back to a letter from Trump's Washington. Which obviously brings with it the implication that it is Trump's Washington again, in which you live. I'm just wondering how you're processing that.
Well, first of all, I would say it feels more like an undigested, unprocessed lump so far.
Okay.
But I think it does speak to the moment that we didn't even need to wait until the inauguration to do this. And that is really the reality in Washington, as I think we've experienced it these last few weeks, is that it was, in effect, an instant psychological transition. I've never seen a lamer lame duck than Joe Biden in terms of just an almost instant sense of irrelevance. Now, of course, that's, I think, compounded by the fact that he didn't run for re-election. Maybe it would have been different if he had run and lost. But in this moment, Trump is doing things that would have been, of course, head exploding even in the first Trump transition. He has essentially taken on the role and function of president without the responsibilities, without the information. Here he is, flying to Paris, meeting with other world leaders, openly conducting a foreign policy for the United States that is in some ways at odds with the actual current foreign policy of the United States. It's really, there's a reason why we have the idea of only one president at a time. And I think that's another one of those norms that's just being thrown out the window, actually.
Is there anything Biden could have been doing to unlame himself at this point? I kind of suspect no. Part of it is just the nature of just how big of a departure Trump is and how unwilling he is to, kind of abide by the types of transitions that we had throughout our lives before 2016. But part of it is related, I think, to Biden's age and kind of lack of forcefulness speaking. And I mean, he almost kind of conceded the status to Trump when they had their White House meeting. So I don't know. What is there anything you feel like that the sitting president should or could be doing to?
Yeah, if it was a different president, it would be a different transition. In fact, look at Barack Obama. I think he had a very different transition. If you'll recall, again, there was so much more kind of shock and upset and surprise at Trump's victory in 2016. But I think people were really hanging on, what did Obama have to say? How would he frame this very kind of threatening moment up for his supporters? He made a big trip, his final trip was to Europe and to Germany, and then he went to Athens and he spoke about democracy in a big speech. So it was a different transition for a different president and a different moment. I remember watching Trump's initial inauguration in January of 2017 from a gathering at the top of a hotel in Washington, that had a kind of panoramic view around the city. And, that moment when Obama's helicopter flew away and, it's just Trump now, that was a real wow, what are we in for kind of a moment. And I don't think it's going to be that way this time with Joe Biden.
I wonder, just one more thing on the Biden transition. Do you have any thoughts on kind of the swirling conversations around preemptive pardons? Any reporting, anything you're hearing, any notions that within your own mind?
Yeah, this is obviously it would be quite a break, I think, with precedent to do so for people who have not even been accused in any way of crimes. In fact, who would be very offended at the idea that they need a pardon, many of them. And I have run into several people just over the last week here in Washington who are on that 60-person enemies list compiled by Kash Patel, Trump's nominee to head the FBI. And, to a person, they were very adamant. I don't need a pardon. I don't want a pardon. Please do not give me a pardon. This is my country. I'm not leaving the country. I would like to stand and fight. And so, that's the kind of pushback I've heard. Perhaps there are others who aren't vocal, who are privately urging the White House to consider this. I think that it's, we'll see. I'm skeptical about it. But then again, I also very much am in the belief that Democrats continue to underestimate Trump and those who surround him. And that in some ways, I think, was the failure that led to his reelection. But it also would be a potential terrible error to make when he's openly threatening to jail his opponents. His comments the other day about January 6th and that the real criminals were the January 6th committee that investigated him, that was something to pay attention to.
Yeah. Talk more about that notion that the underestimation of Trump led to his reelection. In what sense do you mean that?
Well, look, you can follow the chain back as far as you'd like to, but in my view, one of the fatal errors of the Biden presidency occurred in the very initial weeks and months of the Biden presidency, which is this notion that Donald Trump couldn't possibly come back. And I should say that's not just a mistake of Democrats. Of course, many Republicans who wished to see Trump gone, i.e. Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, Mitch McConnell's on the top of this mistake list.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Absolutely. I think that was a crucial error, a judgment by many, many, many people in Washington and around the country. And, I've been haunted by this quote in the latest Woodward book. It's a quote that he attributes to Ron Klain, Biden's first White House chief of staff, sometime in that initial period, essentially saying, Donald Trump, forget about him. He's just a sideshow. He's irrelevant, essentially. And, that was a mistake.
I love Ron, but yeah, that one hurts. Okay, I want to talk about your latest column, which is about how the scandal in the Trump cabinet appointees isn't just their personal failings. It's easy to focus on their personal failings, of course, because there are many among pretty much all of the cabinet appointees, with a couple exceptions. But I'm wondering, as you kind of assess the cabinet, what are the greatest concerns that you have? What are the scandals that you think people should be focused on?
Yeah, look, to be clear, obviously the personal failings are something to focus on as well. It's as if Trump went out of his way to seek out potential nominees who, had an array of allegations against them. It's as a group, I've never seen so many potential senior officials in the U.S. government accused of sexual misconduct. It's
even the
again,
women. Even Linda McMahon is part of a cover-up.
Come on, right? It's really it's pretty remarkable. It's as if Trump seeks to benefit from the, relativity, right? If all these other people have been accused of so many terrible things, maybe the terrible things I've been accused of in my personal life won't seem so bad. So I don't mean to minimize those allegations, because taken together, they suggest a cabinet that is should be disqualified on that basis alone in many instances. Certainly, if Trump sought to further annihilate any respect and admiration that Americans would have for senior leadership of their government, one way to do it is to appoint people with such a collective set of alleged moral failings and personal failings. But putting that aside, what's notable to me, and I think it can get lost, partially probably by design in the kind of serial controversies, is the collective real extremism of this group of appointees. And in that, I think they are very reflective of Trump's own path here. This is where it is a different potential presidency than it was in 2016. If you look at in many of the key positions in 2016, what was Trump seeking to do? He was seeking to reassure a Republican establishment, if not a Democratic one, that was still very uncertain about him. That's why he sought out figures with kind of brand name stamp of approval. People like the CEO of ExxonMobil, Jim Mattis, incredibly not only decorated but admired former four-star Marine general. His economic appointees were Wall Street leaders who had served in Goldman Sachs, the kind of marquee Wall Street brand. So that was Trump 1.0. Trump 2.0 is a collection of essentially MAGA first, second, and third tier celebrities whose only claim to the job essentially is a personal loyalty to Trump, an ability to rally and excite his electorate, his base, and a willingness and even a desire essentially to blow up, or as Steve Bannon put it, to take a blowtorch to the very institutions that they're being named to lead. And this is a big shift that may go underappreciated at a moment when we are, again, understandably focused on, is the chief of the Pentagon, the largest, most formidable bureaucracy and most powerful military that the world has ever seen? Is this guy capable of managing a 20-person veterans group? No.
Right. Let's talk about him. Pete Hegseth, the weekend Fox anchor that is supposedly going to be leading our military. You kind of mentioned in your column about how there's a little bit of an underappreciation for the threats about using the military to go after the enemy within, the quote unquote enemy within, and how chilling that is. I also want to talk about the military use with regards to deportations. And I want to listen to, this is Stephen Miller on Laura Ingraham the other night. And I think that if you listen to his tone, it is out of step with what you are hearing in the prevailing conventional wisdom about what to expect on the deportations issue. Let's listen to Stephen Miller.
Everything in the world is going to change on January 20th. Because the President of the United States is going to use every single legal, diplomatic, and financial tool to halt the entry of all illegal aliens into this country. There will be no benefits, there will be no entry, there will be no asylum, there will be no admission. You may be prosecuted, you will certainly be arrested, and you will absolutely be deported. The entire world, Mexico, Northern Triangle, Central America, South America, Africa, Asia, the Middle East, will get this message. There is no unlawful route to enter the United States of America. Every presidential authority, including his absolute authority under Article 2 to defend the territorial sovereignty of the United States, will be used, from the Department of Defense to the Department of Justice to Homeland Security and every single other lawful authority at his disposal.
Absolute authority, using the Department of Defense to deal with this issue. Obviously, I think also the cracking down on protests element will be there. What are your thoughts? What are you hearing about having Pete Hegseth in a position where the president will be using the military in this manner?
Well, first of all, I have to say, Tim, listening to that clip, I mean, my blood pressure, my heart is pounding just listening to that rhetoric. It's very, it's very.
This is why I wanted to play that clip,
helpful.
because I do think, don't you think there's like a lot of like,
everything in the world will change.
Yeah, right.
Everything in the world will change. First of all, that's quite a message to send to Trump's reporters. I mean, talk about expectation setting. It's a pretty remarkable expectation setting. I would point out, by the way, that there are laws, and if you followed Stephen Miller's logic there to their extreme, Trump would be violating a whole host of them in order to carry out what Stephen Miller says he's going to do. It is not illegal to seek asylum in this country, and in fact, it is something that is a legal tool available to people who are fleeing persecution and political violence, and that is who we are as a country. And by the way, it is not illegal to seek asylum in this country. We have a process for determining whether you're eligible for it or not.
Yeah, and that is why I wanted to play it, because I do. Don't you sense that there's kind of like is he really going to do it all? Is he really going to actually do all this? And, even Trump's rhetoric himself was, again, on the Trump scale, totally outside the bounds of any normal politician. But on Kristen Welker, you could see at times how he would try to modulate things. And he's like throwing a bone at the Dreamers and that sort of thing. Stephen Miller is going to be in charge of this deal, him and Tom Homan. And his rhetoric is unmistakable. And I do think it's important to take that very seriously.
Yes, exactly. For sure. I mean, I am amazed at the, ability. I think it says something about human nature, human psychology, but, the triumph, you might say, of hope over experience when it comes to Donald Trump. Again and again and again, people believing that he somehow doesn't want to do the things that he's been very clear in saying that he wants to do. I spend a fair amount of time with foreign policy types, and believe me, you should hear what they say privately. Even many very stringent public critics of Donald Trump, they just can't really believe that he means to do to Ukraine what he's been saying very clearly, and what his backers have been saying very clearly that they want to do. They're still talking about, well, maybe he's going to give Ukraine more aid in order to get a bargaining position. Seriously. And so I think it's
Who's
important.
saying that? You don't want to embarrass
more
anybody.
people that you
people
would
that should know better. People that should know
more
better.
People than you would think. Again, it's I understand it when they look at the problem and try to unpack it rationally. They think about things like Henry Kissinger and Richard Nixon. How do you bring the Vietnamese to the table? Well, you escalate to de-escalate. Okay, well, is that an option that's really available in the Donald Trump, J.D. Vance world, where you're going to somehow send lots more weapons to Ukraine in order to convince Putin that you're serious about making a deal? Color us skeptical, right?
Yeah.
Going
Nixon
back to your question.
Nixon and Kissinger ain't walking through that door on January 20th. It's Trump and Hegseth. It's not the same deal in Tulsi.
Not the same deal. Look, is it true that Donald Trump often talks tough and fails to fully deliver? Sure. Ask him, where is that entire big, beautiful wall with Mexico that Mexico was going to pay for in December of 2016? Well, he often overpromises and underdelivers. You could say that was the motto of his business, and in some ways, it's been part of the motto of his career. Translating the very unfleshed out threats and slogans and tweets of his 2024 campaign into policy will inevitably leave a lot on the table that is not possible to carry out and to execute. But that's a very different phenomenon than the one you're talking about, which is people who they pick and choose. They see Donald Trump as this sort of, I'll just take all the good parts and forget about all the bad parts. And I think that's going to be a recipe for a pretty big disappointment for a lot of people who may have voted for Donald Trump thinking that he was going to reduce the price of eggs, only to find that he's doing a lot of stuff that they feel that they didn't vote for.
including the opposite, which is maybe increasing grocery prices with tariffs and deportations and extending the Trump tax cuts. It's not exactly a deflationary agenda. I do want to get back to Hegseth, though. The other news yesterday was, which, because I'm living in reality, which I previewed for people on this podcast yesterday. I was talking to Iowa Republican friends, none of whom thought Joni Ernst was going to be the key person that spiked Hegseth in the end. She put out a statement yesterday afternoon. I appreciate Pete Hegseth's responsiveness and respect for the process. Following our encouraging conversations, Pete committed to completing a full audit of the Pentagon and selecting a senior official who will uphold the role and value of our servicemen and women based on quality and standards, not quotas, et cetera, et cetera. So Joni, it seems like she's going to kind of find a rationalization to get there here based on some promise by Pete Hegseth that he won't ban women from the military. Not surprising, but I think telling of where things are going in Trump's Washington. I wonder how you assess kind of the Hegseth nomination and what Joni said at this point.
Yeah, I mean, look, Hegseth decided to fight and took a page out of the Kavanaugh playbook and, is just sort of brazening through, aided by the kind of MAGA media mob that has proven to be a very effective police force for the Senate Republican Conference. Yeah. These guys are desperate not to be the face of resistance. They all know what happens to the resistors. They're isolated, shunned, and forced out of office in Donald Trump's worldview. And so, math, however, is still math. And they actually have a pretty tight margin here. They can only afford to lose 3 Republican senators, assuming all Democrats hang together on any individual nomination. And it strikes me that, perhaps the Ernsts and Collinses and Murkowskis of the world are, waiting, biding their time, hoping that an actual FBI background check, an actual committee process turns up material in writing, in sort of fine print that you can't dispute, that makes it more possible for them to get rid of this nomination. If it actually comes to a vote, I think it would be very hard for these senators to publicly oppose Trump at the very beginning of his presidency. But I don't think it's a done deal yet on Hegseth in particular, because there is a paper trail here. And what are they going to do when they're confronted in writing with that whistleblower report that my colleague Jane Mayer reported about in the New Yorker? I think it's a pretty damning indictment. Hegseth and his allies have misrepresented what these allegations are, claiming that it's simply the word of a single disgruntled employee. Could not be farther from the truth. That would be confronted. I think the senators would have to confront the fact that Hegseth has been publicly misrepresenting and not telling the truth about what these allegations even are, even since he's been nominated by Trump. So, I don't think it's a done deal yet, but I agree with you that anyone who is expecting the Republican Senate to grow a spine and to, be in a confrontational mode from Donald Trump from day one, they are totally misreading the politics of this and the situation.
Yeah, and maybe it's possible, at least in the case of Tulsi and RFK, that there might have to be a couple more Republicans that dissent, because there was some reporting yesterday that Bernie might be open to supporting Tulsi and RFK nomination. I think Fetterman potentially, at least in the case of RFK as well. I think Cory Booker maybe even allowed some openness. I kind of find that hard to believe, but TBD. All right, guys, let's be real. Wearing hard pants, it's not the greatest. All right, wearing nice dress pants, stiff, uncomfortable fabric, it's a pain. So I've got a holiday gift for me to you. Those days are finally over. Public Rec's Daymaker pants are here to make sure you stay comfy and classy this season. They feel like your favorite sweats, but look like tailored pants. Super stretchy with an elastic waistband so you can rock them anywhere. Whether you're kicking back with holiday movies, making your way through leftovers, or watching bowl games with the boys, these pants have you covered. Give the gift of comfort to yourself or someone you love this holiday season with Public Rec's Daymaker pants. And for a limited time, you can get 20% off your entire order with code TheBulwark at publicrec.com. That's 20% off when you use promo code TheBulwark at publicrec.com. I grabbed a couple of these. I got some brown pants. I've been trying to move away from khakis. I'm not a khakis man. And, I'm trying to look for some alternatives out there to the jeans that I've been telling you about. And I love these like brown Public Rec pants. They're slim. They look dressy-ish. We live in comfort. We live in times where people want comfort. All right. It's post-COVID. Donald Trump's going to be president again. You might as well be comfortable. And these brown little Public Rec pants I got have me looking skinny, comfortable, and I've been wearing them all over the place. So stop suffering in regular pants and give the gift of comfort this holiday season. For a limited time only, our listeners get 20% off when you use code TheBulwark at checkout. That's 20% off with the code TheBulwark at publicrec.com. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Say goodbye to pants that put up a fight, because when comfort meets style, you found Public Rec. Hey, y'all, if you love this podcast and want to listen to all Bulwark podcasts ad-free, join Bulwark Plus today. You can click the link in this description. You'll get the best politics newsletters in the business, and you can become a Bulwark Plus member right now. We'd appreciate it. I'm wondering, so you did some reporting kind of as is of your expertise, like from abroad, what our allies are saying, what foreign diplomats are saying. There was a delicious quote from a French ambassador in your column about the nomination of two of Trump's daughter's father-in-laws to ambassadorships, one of whom, Charles Kushner, who he had pardoned, the other Tiffany's father-in-law. So I'm wondering what you're just kind of hearing out there about just that, that group broadly, also if anything, specifically about Hegseth.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, the world of diplomacy is not shocked this time about Trump. They've been preparing for it. I think maybe some of them have taken some of the wrong lessons from Trump 1.0. The current thing that I'm seeing right now in, kind of foreign policy land is an absolute proliferation of op-eds that all have the theme of, here's how Donald Trump, you brilliant man, you could win a Nobel Peace Prize, followed by insert the foreign policy person's favorite policy prescription. And so, I mean, literally, like whether the topic is, the Middle East and Iran, or it's Ukraine and Russia, there's a lot of, dear Donald, I'd love to help get you your Nobel Peace Prize if you only follow my prescription to do exactly the opposite of what you have said you are planning to do. But putting that aside, I think that, there is a view that Trump is pretty transactional. I think there is a fairly clear-eyed sense that, especially for Europe, that, it's going to be a longer-term, almost a structural shift away from the kind of deep partnership that the U.S. has built with its allies in Europe over the last few decades, that is coming to an end in some way, and will be fundamentally rearranged both by our growing economic nationalism and protectionism, which has been true to a limited extent even in the Biden presidency, and also by just absolute louder and louder demands, again, in both parties, that Europe pay more for its own security. So that's, I think, one big realignment that's happening. I think there's a sense of fault lines emerging inside potentially the new Trump administration on issues like what to do about Iran, negotiate or go all in and tough on Iran. Same thing with China. I think there are a real constellation of opinions about China, and some super hawks on China and Taiwan who are going to be entering the Trump administration, but then Trump himself, who, as you know, is constantly wanting to make a deal with Xi, and whom I must say, I find it hard to believe Donald Trump is ever going to be going to war to defend Taiwan. Very big difference from many of the hawks that he's put inside his own administration.
Yeah. Just for posterity's sake, The quote from Gerard Arad, who is the French ambassador to the U.S., was, "In the madness of Trump's nomination, there is expressed the near total contempt for human respect, customs, and law." They do it well. They do it well over there.
Gerard is a very, very pithy ambassador. And by the way, he was the French ambassador here to Washington in the first Trump term. And I will never forget at the end of Trump's first year in office, his annual holiday party, he hung the Christmas trees upside down in the French ambassador's residence.
It's taking a page out of Mrs. Alito's playbook. All right, I want to go back to the Ukraine conversation you were mentioning earlier. There's maybe some gullible hopefulness in some quarters, but JD Vance has kind of laid out an outline for what they think the end of the war would look like. Having maybe a demilitarized zone, stopping at the current lines of combat, a promise that Ukraine's not going to join NATO. I mean, that would be a clear loss for Ukraine. And I've had on the spot Michael Weiss and Bill Kristol recently. I've had several people on the podcast who are not quite as confident as everybody else seems to be that Putin is actually going to go along with whatever deal Trump wants, that maybe he might think that this is an opportunity to push further. I'm wondering what you are hearing and what you think the state of play is.
Yeah, that's right. I think they're right to spotlight that as being a big question. Why would Putin want to hand Trump an enormous win on the very front end of his presidency? Putin defines his conflict, and I think it's very important because it's underappreciated here in this country. He says to his own public that he is at war not with Ukraine, but with NATO and the United States. So Putin has defined Russia as being in a state of armed conflict and war with the United States and NATO. And I think that that's an important reminder when thinking about, what would cause Putin to stop being in that war. Now, it's an incredibly costly and painful war. There are literally thousands of Russian casualties every day, every week. It is long-term unsustainable, but in the short term, perhaps more sustainable for Russia than for Ukraine. Trump, reminder, has promised to end the war in 24 hours. There's essentially no one who believes that is an actual possibility. At the same time, there is a strong view that we may well see a de-escalation, a ceasefire in place. Donald Trump, whatever it is, we'll call it the greatest peace deal in the history of time, but it's far, far more likely to be not a peace deal that definitively ends the war so much as a ceasefire that would enable both sides to regroup. The big question is, what, if any, security guarantees for Ukraine is Trump and other European allies prepared to offer? Because otherwise, it's simply a pause that enables Putin to rearm and to, find new ways of going back after Ukraine after some interval of time. And so that part is very, very unclear. Donald Trump, as you know, is a longtime skeptic of NATO. He's a longtime skeptic of Ukraine. And is he really going to commit the United States to securing Ukraine's independence and sovereignty in some meaningful way? I mean, I have a lot of questions about that.
It's hard to imagine. Packing for a trip this holiday season? Tired of wasting time trying to figure out what clothes are best? Well, we recently discovered Unbound Merino, a travel clothing company that is perfect for the traveler in your life. Unbound Merino was created by 3 lifelong friends who are looking to solve the age-old problem of how to pack light but also look great while jet setting. Well, I haven't jet set yet in my new Unbound Merino. I got to tell you, I have one of those long sleeve tees, one of those Henley tees, and I'm looking good. It is comfy. I'm wearing it around the house. I'm wearing it to dinner. Highly recommend. Unbound offers timeless, versatile clothing that will have you looking great in any situation. The clothing is made of merino wool, which is a temperate, regulating, moisture wicking, and most importantly, super comfortable. Unbound makes it simple to pack for short or long trips since their clothes can be worn for weeks on end without needing a wash. Unbound's clothing allows travelers to pack lighter, save unchecked baggage fees, and spend more time focusing on creating travel memories. Head over to their website, unboundmerino.com, where customers can use our code, TheBulwark, for 10% off their order. It's all this troubling, concerning news we have. We had some good news with the fall of Assad, and maybe who knows what the future will hold for Syria. But given just how horrific and depraved his management of the country has been, having to have him flee to Moscow is good news, at least in the micro. Hopefully, I preferred he'd have to flee to Siberia, but Moscow might be okay. We'll see how that shakes out for him. I'm wondering your kind of thoughts on the developments there in Syria, and in particular, like what that says about the weakening of Russia, and what the view might be from Russia, since you've spent so much time there.
Yeah, it is fitting in many ways that Assad ends up in Moscow. Maybe he'll be getting dinner with Yanukovych, the deposed former leader of Ukraine, and they can commiserate. First of all, of course, it underscores the extent to which Assad really was a client and dependent upon Russia as well as Iran for his survival over these last, more than a decade of horrific civil war in Syria. And when his backers withdrew their support, he fell with astonishing speed and rapidity. I think you're right to say we should take a breath and note that this is a good day. Whatever comes next, and there are very justifiable reasons to be concerned, skeptical, worried about the future of Syria. This was a horrific dictatorship, and it lasted more than 50 years. I've been really having flashbacks the last few days to the fall of Saddam Hussein, which I covered on the ground for the Washington Post. And I remember interviewing prisoners in the prison that they had been tortured in the southern city of Basra within hours of their jailers departing. And that for me was an unforgettable experience and a reminder, that this is how these dictatorships rule, is through fear and torture and, a kind of repression that is almost hard to imagine. And so I think it's really important to take note of this, watch the scenes of these prisoners desperately searching in the Sednaya prison in Damascus. It's something really powerful and important that's happening. But to the point about the geopolitics of this, it's going to force Donald Trump to immediately make a series of decisions. And, you don't really know what the right answer is going to be. It looks like Iran is seriously weakened. It looks like Russia is seriously weakened. And by the way, not only were they propping up Assad, but they had their major base, naval base in the region that was a way for Russia to project power not only in the Middle East, but also into Africa with its mercenaries that were based there. It looks like they're going to be losing that. And I think it's the kind of blow that a more traditional American foreign policy leader, whether Republican or Democrat, would absolutely see opportunity in this. But remember, Trump is the guy who seems to admire the autocrats and adversaries and be very dismissive of the allies. So it's not clear to me what he'll do. You saw his all caps, hands off, not our problem missive the other day on Truth Social. Of course, it's our problem and our concern. This very directly concerns America's ally, Israel. It very directly concerns America's interests throughout the region. And it's a little worrisome to have somebody whose basic instinct is to, stick their head in the sand or to want to be treating with the dictator, Vladimir Putin, who made that civil war possible for the last few years.
Yeah, and it managed the hundreds of troops that we have still in Syria, which he might not know about or care about. Who knows? The other thing to me, the other kind of glimmer of hope. I know you tried to bring us back into Trump. I'm taking this away from that. All right, it is what it is. We'll see what Trump does with this in January. But you posted a picture of Assad at the Arab League, like that was in 2023, I guess it was. And to me, this is kind of a lesson about, again, not to be Pollyanna about who ends up taking over Syria or what that looks like, but about the fact that the smarties don't always exactly know what's going to happen, and we don't have to submit to just total cynicism in all of these cases. Like, positive developments can happen, change can happen, and it's fun. It's darkly funny that, like, right at the moment that Assad was kind of being welcomed back into the League of Nations, because people are just like, well, I guess there's nothing we can do here. We're stuck with this guy. We're stuck with this butcher. And it is like pretty shortly after that moment that he's toppled. And I think there's a lesson there.
No, I mean, that image really has always stuck with me. That was just, I believe, in May of 2023 that Assad was welcomed back to the Arab League. There he is featured in that family photo. Remember, many of those leaders in the Middle East are the ones that Donald Trump and his family feel most comfortable with. Those are the hereditary, Gulf Arab potentates that he may be well soon making deals with again. But it's also a consequence. It's not just like this happened and it was some sort of miracle, from above. I mean, one of the proximate causes of Assad's falling was the backlash and the war that was triggered by Hamas's terrorist attack against Israel on October 7th of last year. And so this is absolutely can only be seen in that context of the dramatic weakening of, the quote unquote axis of resistance, that is Iran and its proxies around the region, Hamas. There's also been the war between Hezbollah and Israel, which now is entering a ceasefire, but, has dramatically weakened Hezbollah in neighboring Lebanon. Iran itself been weakened. And, Syria was a major transit point between Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas. This is where and how the weapons and intelligence and that's how the alliance worked, was through Syria. So it's a major defeat for those powers as a direct result of October 7th. But, I know you want me not to talk about Trump here, but
do it. It's fine. It's fine. Just joking.
No, look, I really think that, you're seeing in that True Social post from Trump, in everything that he says and does, is forget about the big, bad, scary world, except that I'm strong Donald and I'll be out there, defending you in it. But, he's redefined America first. He's redefined national security threats as not what happens because of instability in Syria, but what happens here in the United States. And I think this quote that he said in mid-October of the campaign did not get nearly enough attention. But to me, it is the story of what he's really going to be doing in this next term. And he was asked about, these Ukraine, Russia, whatever. What did he say? He said, we have two enemies. We have the outside enemy, and then we have the enemy from within. And the enemy from within, in my opinion, is more dangerous than China, Russia, and all these countries.
That is chilling. I want to just close by circling us back to the topic at the top about the lame duck president, because something you just said there about how the response to October 7th precipitated a lot of this. It is interesting. You can imagine a different world, a different president, where the U.S. president was, I don't know, crowing right now, or talking about American influence and how much influence we have in the world, right? I mean, like, between Ukraine and the assistance we've provided Ukraine, and Israel and the assistance we've provided Israel, like, the strategy that has been put forth, while obviously not perfect or not without flaws or things to criticize, has succeeded in weakening Russia and Iran and their malign influence. And I feel like nobody wants to give any credit for that. Like, the Democrats don't want to, because some of them don't like the way that Israel's conducted the war. neocon Republicans don't want to give Biden any credit for anything. MAGA Republicans obviously don't want to give him credit for anything. Biden doesn't seem to want to take credit. I don't know. I do think it's noteworthy, though, that like we've seen this diminishment of our foes, and it's almost like as if we had, the American role there is barely even part of the conversation.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. It's the squeeze, and what's happened as a result is that Biden, even his foreign policy legacy for someone who was so experienced as a foreign policy leader who made that a big part of his selling point, it's not clear, that there's anything permanent to look at that says, here's what he accomplished. That's true in Ukraine, despite vast amounts of aid, despite shoring up Ukraine when it mattered, unable to provide sufficient amounts. And you could say, well, that never was possible or conceivable or politically doable. But whatever the reasons, Ukraine is not winning that conflict right now and is now facing an American president who seems to want to withdraw support. Same thing in the Middle East. Israel is prevailing, but at enormous and horrific cost. And it's been at a political cost for Biden inside his party. One thing I would spotlight in these next, I think it's about 40 days in between now and the inauguration, a lot of chatter about, the prospects for a hostage deal with Hamas. There are still, it's unclear how many, but there are still living hostages, both Israeli and some American, inside Gaza. I'm sure the Biden administration is working all out to make that happen. They really want to have another, sort of accomplishment to point to before Trump comes in. I don't know if it's possible or not. We've been living on fumes of false hope for a really long time when it comes to the hostages.
Yeah. Susan Glasser, thank you for reporting on Trump's Washington for me, so I don't have to, so I can view it from afar in New Orleans. I appreciate you and hope to have you back. We certainly will have you back in the new year.
Tim, it's great to be with you. If we have to go through this, at least we can talk it through together, and you are an incredible voice, so thank you so much.